Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and more to the point, welcome to Gwen has to do a really short book because Gwen is super behind on her work. And now I will stop talking about myself in the third person. So The Paper Bag Princess is a children's classic. It's the good feminist message where the princess saves the prince. It's got the important message that if you are clever and, capable and sneaky and all kind and determined, that can be really much more important than wearing pretty clothes and, and so on and so forth. So, it's all about the good messages and everything else, and someday I will find that book that had the Spoonerism in it that I, keep on wishing I could remember well enough to find. But I can't, so we're just going to have to deal with Robert Munsch. So, as with many kids' books, of course, the illustrations are central and key, and Michael Martchenko, who did these illustrations, is really fantastic because he does, they're good bog standard cartoony things, but he can be just evocative enough, and I probably should have taken the picture of the dragon setting the forest on fire, but I didn't, so here's what we've got. So here's the first picture of the Princess Elizabeth and her prince, whose name I already can't remember because that would require me to, pay attention to things. And the interesting thing, of course, is that, you see her and she's dressed nicely as a princess and so on, and he is aloof and clearly more interested in something that's not the princess. And the interesting thing about this, of course, is that this is painfully obvious foreshadowing that anybody who's talking about this book with children should probably point out this picture where you see the princess is clearly deeply in love with the prince with all of the little hearts going around her head, and he isn't even looking at her. Which already foreshadows the end when he rejects her for wearing a paper bag after her castle was burned down, and ostensibly eaten by the dragon, because after everything is burned down, and we see that includes all of her clothes, you can see that hint of evocativeness in that this is watercolored, and you can see up at the top he's got some slight fading in the watercolor at the top there, that there's just this slightest hint down the left, right by the prince's left foot, that you can see just this intimation of trees. It's enough of a background to give you something, and the orange emphasizes fire. It's very nicely done. Anyway, so you can see she's, castle's destroyed. She has no clothes because the dragon set all of her clothes on fire. Why he didn't burn all of the clothes off of her prince, I don't know. Because I wonder if, clothes might have interfered with, enjoying this prince, who would be crunchy and taste good with ketchup, as they say. So she shows up wearing her paper bag because it's the only thing left in her castle that's not burned, and she flatters the dragon. It's a standard story. You see it 1,000,001 times. The I will flatter somebody or, tell them, oh, you couldn't possibly do this, until they effectively trapped themselves. There's 1,000,001 folk tales about it. There is Barbie and the Magic of Pegasus moment where she tricks the giant about it. And in this case, she tricks the dragon by saying, wow, look at you, can you really burn down 50 forests? And he burns down 50 forests, and she says, wow, that's amazing. So he burns down even more forests, and by the time he's done, he can't set anything on fire because he's used up all his fire. And then she says, wow, I heard you're really fast, and he zips around the world in 10 seconds. And she goes, wow, do it again, and he does it again in 20 seconds. And then he's just pooped out and passes out on the ground because he is an idiot. So she goes in to rescue her prince, who basically chews her out for not rescuing him while, dressed in a pretty dress with nice hair and so on. And she breaks off the engagement because, well, she went through all of this to rescue him, and, she rescued him without getting any sort of injury or in any sort of difficulty, without him getting hurt in any way, and all he can do is yell at her because she's stinky and wearing a bag. Which, for the record, yeah, she's stinky and wearing a bag, and you'd think, given that she was having to chase after the dragon across the countryside, that she could have taken a minute to, I don't know, rinse off in a stream. But, the point is, of course, that here, she was clever, she rescued him, and that's really more important and more impressive than wearing the pretty dress at the start. Valid message to give children. But you can see that he's finally paying attention to her at the end here, by, because she is a big mess. And Robert Munsch is, a classic for these sorts of things, for these stories that are fun and funny and silly and ridiculous, but have one really good solid message to give young children, the children who are reading these books, and often for the first time reading these books on their own. Yes, of course, a lot of parents read these books with their children, but the thing about children's books is they're also meant for kids to pick up for the first time and read for themselves. It's why you have pictures in them, in point of fact, is because it gives the kids something next to the words to look at, to break up the difficulty of reading, and to give them some additional context that they might not get in the reading because it's simplified text and simplified words, and Robert Munsch is really, really good for that. So yeah, this is a classic, and it's fun, and I don't really have a lot to say because, well, I could probably go on a disquisition about, the details of the art and the cross-hatching on the rocks and how this is deceptively simple drawing and other such things. Let's be honest, I could only talk about this for 15 minutes anyways. So we will leave off here with the prince pointing at the princess as he lectures her for not wearing any pretty clothes after they all got burned down. By the way, the dragon says, "I like eating princesses, but I ate a whole castle today," which fascinates me because I really wonder about this dragon's diet, given that castles are made up predominantly of rock. So, do dragons, have a genuine, need for actual iron in their diet as opposed to, iron we get in our foods, but just lumps of metal in their diet, or need rock or granite or something? I don't know. It's a thought, and one of those thoughts that you really shouldn't have about books like this, because at that point you start taking it apart on a logical level, and at that point everything falls apart and nobody likes you because you're being annoying. So I'm going to stop here. And that's everything that I have to say, because I really shouldn't say anymore. And I will see you all next week.